Hi, I'm Ashley, that holistic gal. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about how mold in my home almost killed me and my, at the time, 5-year-old son. Everyone knows about mold toxicity and black mold and all of that. What most people don't realize is that most homes do have some degree of mold, and some degree of mold is okay as long as it's minimal. But once you have an exorbitant amount of mold in your home, whether it's visible or hidden, which in my case it was hidden all over my home, that's when it can impact your health really terribly. So I had no idea I had hidden mold in my home, and at the end of 2020, after I had been working from home for several months already, that's when my health started declining. That's when I knew something was up, something was wrong. So some of the symptoms I was having brain fog, memory issues, heart palpitations. I was feeling dizzy even when I was sitting down. When I would stand up, my vision would black out for a couple of seconds. I had hoarseness in my throat, so sometimes it was hard to read or sing or just even talk. I also had a goiter in my neck, like indicating a thyroid issue. I had anxiety, insomnia, heart palpitations, and towards the end I also started getting bloody noses. Also ear pain, which I eventually learned that it was a lymphatic issue. But in addition to all of that, I had also had major acne. Those were just some of the serious issues that I experienced. I know there's probably some more that I missed, because mold can cause so many different issues, and with everyone it's always going to be something different. Another symptom that I forgot to mention that I had was something called mold rage. Now, at the time, of course, I didn't know what mold rage is. I didn't even know there was such a thing, but I was becoming extremely irritable and angry, especially when I was homeschooling my son, when he wouldn't understand things, and I would just yell at him, and it wasn't me. I didn't know why I was acting this way. I didn't like that I was acting this way, and it was very alarming to me that I was acting like that, and I didn't have a reason why. I just didn't like my behavior, but it was so hard for me to stop. Now, as for my son's symptoms, he was frequently urinating more than a child should. He was waking up itchy every day, and the most alarming symptom he had was he was having memory issues and trouble recalling the alphabet. So he had memorized the alphabet around the age of 4, and I think around the time that he had forgotten alphabet, he was almost 5. So that was super scary. And that didn't actually happen until after I had started experiencing the bloody noses. So at the end of 2020, when some of my symptoms were getting bad and my son's symptoms weren't too bad at the time, he hadn't had the memory issues yet, that's when I decided to hire a functional nutritionist, because I thought, well, maybe there's something going on with my eating habits. Maybe I need to incorporate something into my diet, because maybe that's just the reason why I'm not feeling well. So I hired the functional nutritionist. She ordered a GI stool map test and an organic acids test. I guess the most important thing I got out of it was I had a Candida issue. Now, everyone has Candida in their gut, but sometimes it gets out of hand and you have Candida overgrowth, and that's what I was experiencing in my gut, which also made sense because at times I was feeling bloated and I could only eat breakfast and lunch, and by the end of the day I just felt so bloated I didn't want to eat dinner. So the functional nutritionist put me on an anti-Candida diet. So I was like, okay, I'll do this anti-Candida diet for 3 months and I'm gonna feel so much better afterwards and everything's gonna be fine. When you're on an anti-Candida diet, they tell you to avoid certain foods like starches and lots of fruit and sugar, and I religiously followed that diet for the 3 months. But the thing is, after those 3 months were almost up, I was actually feeling worse. That's when I started having more brain fog and anxiety, and that's when I started experiencing the bloody noses. So that's kind of when I decided to fire my functional nutritionist, because she wasn't helping me. She couldn't get to the root cause of the issue. And that's when I figured out on my own that, well, that's when I decided to investigate further, looking at other symptoms of Candida. And that's when I realized that itchiness and belching, which my son was also experiencing, are symptoms of Candida. And so that's when I was like, okay, if I have Candida issues and my son has Candida issues, I think I have a mold problem in my home. I came to that conclusion because I had seen some people on a local Facebook group talk about mold in their home and getting their home checked for mold with a test called an ERMI, which stands for Environmental Relative Moldiness Index. It's basically a mold dust test or a mold DNA test where you use a unscented Swiffer cloth and you just dust your entire home in certain areas you need to avoid, but essentially you just dust your home and you send off the Swiffer cloth to the lab, and the lab will email you an ERMI report showing your lab results. So I did order an ERMI because I wanted to see if I had a hidden mold issue in my home, which I was pretty certain that I did. And when I got the ERMI report back, it showed that my house was in like the 4th quadrant, and I think my ERMI score was probably 23.5 or something like that, which showed that my home did have a high degree of mold. After that, I think I ordered a urine mycotoxin test as well, just to prove to my mom that mold was actually making me sick, because she didn't believe me when I told her that I thought mold was making me sick. She's always want to see the proof. She's a bit of a skeptic. I'm just very grateful that was my home and I was in control of the situation. I just kind of wanted some support from my mom, and she really wasn't supporting me. But I knew that mold was the issue, but I felt like I needed to prove to her that I was actually sick from mold. So I did the ERMI. I did a urine mycotoxin test, which showed that I had several different mycotoxins in my urine. And I also did a VCS test, which is a visual contrast sensitivity test online. The test is actually free, but if you want to get the report, I think it's $15. And that's just another way to test your body or your vision to see if you may be impacted by mold or other biotoxin related illnesses. So I did the ERMI, I did the mycotoxin urine test, and then I did the visual contrast sensitivity test. And then after I got that, I think it was probably after I got the ERMI report, I also hired a mold inspector to find the hidden mold in my home, which I was pretty certain they were going to find mold because it was showing up on the ERMI. It was showing up on my urine mycotoxin test. So the mold inspector found quite a bit of mold hidden in my home. It was in both of my HVAC units. It was in several different wall cavities in my home. I'm not going to go into all the details about where the mold was found, but it was definitely enough. Oh, it was also in my attic, but it was definitely enough to make me and my son sick. After that, I was like, okay, I'm going to remediate my home, but I needed to do research on how to properly remediate a home, make sure I was hiring the right company. And I was like, okay, we can just deal with living in my home for another couple months until I can get my house remediated. Well, that was when I started feeling really, really sick, and I was just feeling super unsafe in my home. I didn't even want to go to sleep. I didn't feel safe going to sleep. I didn't know if I was going to wake up in the morning. I was having some major anxiety, insomnia, panic attacks. I felt like I was dying, and I was to the point where I was going to sleep outside in a tent if my parents didn't allow us to move in with them. So when I told my mom that, she finally was like, okay, why don't you guys just move in with us until you can figure out the situation with your home? And so we did. And I would say within a couple of weeks of staying with them, I felt so much better. And I wouldn't say my son was feeling super sick like me, but after a month of living with him, I don't think he was waking up itchy anymore. He wasn't having memory issues. I would say within like 3 weeks, I was feeling a lot better. Some of the symptoms still lingered, like Candida issues, the bloating, the feeling full, but I felt safe and I felt so much better. So I was happy that we were in a safe place, even though I did make my mom do an ERMI on her home, just because I was worried that their home might be more unsafe than mine. But it turns out their home was enough. It was safe enough for us to heal in. So just know every home is going to have mold, and just because an ERMI report shows that the home has mold doesn't mean that you won't be able to heal in the home. So while me and my son were staying at my parents' house, that's when I decided to hire the mold remediation company. I thought I found a really great one, but it ended up turning into a huge disaster. It was a botched mold remediation job. They didn't use containment. They didn't do a lot of the things that they said they were going to do. They just made a huge mess, and they didn't do the small particle cleaning of my home at the end of mold remediation like they had told me they were going to do. They left everything super dusty, and there was actually still mold in my home. It was just a really, really bad situation. So then I hired a second mold remediation company, and I had a very similar situation with that. They didn't use containment. They didn't use negative air pressure. I ended up sneaking into my home after they had left for one of the days, and I discovered all of that. Plus they were also using bleach in my home, which is a super no-no when you're having your home remediated for mold. You should never use bleach on mold. And so I fired them, and I just kind of felt pretty helpless after that, because I was like, my home is unsafe. How am I going to find this perfect mold remediation company that I'm looking for? It's literally like trying to find a needle in a haystack. I was almost to the point of giving up or just trying to remediate on my own, and that's when I found this wonderful company, and they were able to remediate my home the proper way. He understood everything. He had actually experienced mold illness himself, so he was very compassionate and empathetic towards my situation. And the funny thing is, they ended up finding more mold in my home than my mold inspector had found, and it amazed me that they did such a great job, and that they truly cared about the health of myself and my son, because those first two companies I hired, they were awful. They didn't care about my well-being. They just wanted to get paid and for the job they were doing. So it's been about 2 years since my home has been remediated. I'm still living with my parents because mold remediation was super expensive. I ended up spending probably around $60,000 on mold remediation. And so, as you can see, rebuilding is very costly too. And I just haven't had the funds to come up with everything that I need to rebuild my home. So right now it's just me and my dad slowly rebuilding my home. It's mainly my dad because he's been putting all the drywall back up, but it's been a long process. And I will say, in regards to my healing journey, I'm feeling so much better, so much better. I wouldn't say I was completely healed after 3 weeks of staying with my parents, but I think after like a year of staying with my parents, I probably was like 95% healed, and I'm still healing. I still have some liver issues and caffeine intolerances sometimes, but I've noticed since I've been getting more sun and I've been using those X39 patches that my liver is starting to heal. So I'm super grateful that I discovered that mold was making myself and my son sick, because I truly believe, had I not discovered this, I may have died living in my home. I truly felt like I was dying at the time, and I'm just so grateful that I caught this early enough to rectify the issue. If this video has been helpful for you, or if you found it interesting, or if you learned something new, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'll be sharing some more about mold as well as other holistic healing modalities, because I'm that holistic gal. If you want to learn more about the X39 patches, I'll also put a link down in the description for the X39 patches, and you can also check out some of my other videos where I discuss the X39 patches. And if you want to learn more about mold, or whether it be mold illness, mold inspection, or mold remediation, you can actually follow my other Instagram page. The handle is Minimizing Mold. Also, love it if you would subscribe to this channel. I hope to see you next time on my next video. Thank you so much, and talk to you soon.